Marvel Rivals Season 2 is here with a huge update that will change the entire meta. In this video, we are covering the patch notes in so much depth with helpful graphs that you will know exactly what each change meant for every hero. That way, you will be more prepared than anyone else heading into your Season 2 ranked matches. Speaking of ranked for Season 2, we are getting the much awaited and probably much needed ranked reset. The rank reset is going to be across 9 divisions or 3 entire ranks. So if you were Diamond 1 before, you are now going to be Silver 1 heading into Season 2. The second big change heading into ranked for Season 2 is we are getting a map pool. To accommodate this map pool, we of course are getting the new map Krakoa, and now we are getting rid of 2 maps from competitive: Tokyo 2099 Shin Shibuya, which is a convoy map, and the Royal Palace, which is a domination map. Overall, in ranked Q, we are going to have 1 less map in the competitive pool. But of the 2 maps that are being removed, I'm glad one of them is Royal Palace, which personally I think is the weakest map in the game. However, let me know down in the comments if you wish they would have removed a different map instead and why. And then of course, heading into Season 2, we are getting our first changes to the team up abilities in Marvel Rivals, but I want this video to focus on the individual hero balance changes, so I'm just going to put a picture of all the changes to the team ups, and then we can go ahead and get started with the balance changes. But real quick, right before we get into the balance changes, I just want to take a look at the pick and win rates for all of the heroes in Marvel Rivals. That way, we can set our expectations of what characters might be good or bad heading into the second season. So here is a chart of all the heroes in Marvel Rivals based on their pick rates in Grandmaster competitive lobbies. As you can see, the least picked character in competitive is Black Widow, who also has the lowest win rate. Conversely, the 5 most picked characters in competitive all have negative win rates. However, take that with a grain of salt because win rates is not the only clue we can look at to determine if a character is good or bad. For example, as one of the strongest comps is dive, a lot of people like to panic switch to Namor when they're already losing the game. So if you take a look at Namor, even though he's one of the strongest characters in the game, he has a negative win rate, which is likely from people panic switching when they're already losing to try and save the game. And here's that same list, but now instead organized from the worst win rate to the best win rate. As you can see, the characters with the highest win rates are not necessarily the most picked. So again, take this data with a grain of salt, but I think these graphs are pretty cool to look at. With that, let's finally head into all of the changes for each hero heading into Season 2. Starting with Captain America, who in the patch notes, it looks like he's getting a nerf to his health. However, since he's now an anchor, it's actually overall a total buff, bringing him to a total of 750 HP. Not only that, but his team up ability is giving him a 5% damage boost to all of his abilities. And the only nerf he's getting in return is his shield is decreasing from 400 HP to 350. Overall, a pretty good buff for Captain America. Next up is Doctor Strange, who is getting their total HP buffed as he is now an anchor, going to a total of 700 HP. But in return, he's getting a very big nerf to his damage output. His primary fire is getting a nerf, so if you hit every single projectile, you are now doing 10 less damage, or in other words, you need an entire extra shot to kill squishies. Not only that, but his E ability, or when he explodes from the dark magic, when his meter's at 100, instead of doing 130 damage, you are now doing 120. So a 10 damage nerf to his E. And since your primary fire does less damage, you are charging this E less often. So in other words, your E has a longer cooldown and does less damage. And because of all of that, Doctor Strange's ultimate is going to take longer to charge. So he's also getting a little bit of an ultimate nerf. Next up is Hulk, who got a couple of buffs. First of all, his movement speed is being increased from a base of 800 to 850. This is a little bit hard to conceptualize, so I made a graph here and it's showing all of the characters' base movement speed in this game. So as you can see, most characters have a 6 meter per second movement speed of their base, with the exception of Black Panther and Wolverine, who have 7. Now Hulk is going to be faster than everybody in the game except Wolverine and Black Panther, who they're going to be a little bit slower than. And here's that same graph, but now including each character's max movement speed, which includes each hero's ability to go faster than their base speed. So like Psylocke, she can go invisible, but she's also faster, or the Human Torch, you press shift, you get a little bit of fire, you're a little bit faster, stuff like that. Keep in mind this doesn't include abilities like web swings or dashes or the Punisher's zipline, but overall this should give you a pretty good idea of what characters in the game you're going to be able to chase down now as Hulk. But Hulk also got a buff to his jump, where now you can jump a little bit faster after pressing space, which is a good buff. And then he also got a cooldown buff to his shield, going from 12 to 10 seconds. And if you didn't already know, Hulk's bubble, when enemies damage it, it actually fills your ultimate charge meter. So this coming off cooldown faster is also buffing your ultimate cooldown. Next is Penny Parker, who is also getting a bunch of buffs. First, her base health is being increased by 100, giving her a total of 750 HP. Penny is also getting a buff to her movement speed while shooting, so she's going to be slowed less, and most importantly, she is getting the ability to headshot enemies, letting you do more damage overall and getting your ultimate up quicker. But probably most importantly, if you web an enemy, a squishy right in front of you, you can kill them so much faster because you're going to get free headshots. Next is Magneto, who is getting a small nerf to his ultimate charge, going from 3100 to 3400. And then we have The Thing, who is also getting a minor nerf with his damage reduction, going from 30% to 25% for yourself and your allies, so overall you'll be a little bit less survivable, but not too big of a deal. And finally for the tanks, we have Thor, and because his team up anchor is going away, he's going to have 25 less HP overall. However, Thor is also getting a buff to his movement speed, the same as Hulk, going from base 800 to 850. So here's that graph again. These are all the characters Thor is now going to be faster than and have the ability to chase down. Bringing us to the duelists, starting with Black Widow, who's getting a very minor buff to her ability to shoot after ulting and kicking. It's going to be a little bit faster. Overall, very small buff. Next is Hawkeye, who surprisingly somehow only got buffs. First, he's going to be faster when drawing his bow with his primary fire. There's going to be less of a speed reduction there. Second, his hypersonic arrow, which is his E ability, or the ability you shoot at flyers to bring them down to the ground, is going to do 5 more damage per instance, so overall 10 extra damage. And by far his biggest buff is his ultimate ability. Not only did they reduce the ultimate cost, they also increased how fast he can draw his bow, so more DPS, and he's gonna have his ult more often. Very big buff. Next is Hela, who's seeing a buff to her secondary fire, or her right click. When she shoots those projectiles out and they explode, the explosions are each going to do 5 more damage. But this buff is a little bit better than it sounds, because if you land every single projectile, you used to do 176 damage. Now, you are doing 198, basically a 22 damage increase to her secondary fire. Hela is also getting a little buff to her E cooldown, or her stun ability, her little stun orb. It's going from a 12-second cooldown to a 10-second cooldown. However, on the other side of things, she's getting a nerf to her shift or her bird ability. Instead of a 12-second cooldown, now her escape card is going to be a 15-second cooldown. Then for the Human Torch, we have a primary fire buff, giving him less input delay from when you click primary fire on your mouse to when the pellets actually come out of the Human Torch. He is also getting a buff to his Meteor Dash, or his F ability. When you dash onto your flame pool, you're getting 75 bonus health, letting you take 1v1s more confidently. But with that, his Meteor Dash is also getting a cooldown nerf, going from a 12-second cooldown to a 15-second cooldown, but the extra 75 health is worth it for the extra 3 seconds on cooldown. Iron Man is getting a pretty good buff to his survivability. First, they are reducing his hitbox, so it's going to feel like you're taking less damage. He's going to be harder to shoot out of the sky. And secondly, when you use your E ability or your overdrive, you are now getting 100 bonus health. So overall, Iron Man is going to be a little bit harder to kill. Next up is the immortal Iron Fist, who's getting a pretty interesting change that's a little hard to conceptualize. The easy part is his kick cooldown is going from 12 seconds to 10 seconds, which is a little buff there. He's also getting a little nerf when he meditates. He's getting 50 less total HP. However, this bonus health is going to stick around for longer. A little bit of a trade-off there. I think it's worth it. But the biggest change is how Iron Fist is going to do damage after he uses his Dragon Defense, or when he does the punches really fast. He's going to do a little bit more damage, and here is how. I went ahead and made a graph so that way you can see exactly when this is a buff versus when this is a nerf. As you can see, this is pretty much a straight buff to Iron Fist, with the exception of 200 HP targets where this is a damage nerf. Every other character in the game you are going to do more damage to, also except for 250 HP targets where you do the exact same amount of damage. So basically, Iron Fist does more damage to tanks and does less damage to Bruce Banner. A very good trade-off. Here is also a time to kill chart for Iron Fist, and as you can see, you kill everybody faster except for Bruce Banner, especially Groot, who you kill almost half a second faster, 444 milliseconds quicker to be exact. Iron Fist is going to play more like Wolverine, where he's going to target tanks exclusively because you're going to do more damage to them. With that, here is a good time to bring up the changes coming to Wolverine. Wolverine is getting two changes. First, his ultimate ability is going to stun enemies for less time after landing, exactly 0.25 seconds less, so a little nerf there. Secondly, Wolverine is going to acquire rage for his rage meter a little bit differently. First, you're going to get a little bit more rage when you use your primary attacks and when you take damage. So you're going to get a little bit more rage from that. However, you are getting less rage from your dash and your leap ability. And since rage determines how much damage your ultimate ability does, you're going to want to charge that meter up before you look to ult. Now for Moon Knight, who is getting a few different buffs. First, his primary fire is having a projectile speed increase, or in other words, it is going to be easier to shoot people from a distance. He is also getting a buff to his secondary fire, or his right click. For every enemy you hit, you get an additional 25 bonus health up to 100. This is going to make Moon Knight a lot harder to dive, because before he was just probably the best target for dive. He had a giant hitbox and not that much health. However, now he's going to have more health. Moon Knight is also getting a buff to his grapple. You're going to be able to grapple a little bit faster, letting you escape from danger more easily. And another buff for Moon Knight is his ultimate is going to last an entire second longer and is going to have more talons falling down from the sky. However, these are going to have a damage reduction mechanic, so the further you are from the talon, the less damage it does, but overall, this is probably a buff for his ultimate ability. Now for Mr. Fantastic, who is getting mostly buffs, starting with a base health increase from 350 to 375. His primary attack is also going to do 5 extra damage now in both base and big forms. His E or dash cooldown is also being reverted to the way it was before the previous patch, so it's getting a buff from 10 to 8 seconds on its cooldown. But it's also getting another buff, and that is a slow effect against opponents at 35% reduction, which is going to be a very useful tool for countering dive. His ult is also getting a buff, giving you 400 HP always, even if you were in the base form and not the big form. Finally, you are getting more elasticity from your primary fire. For all of these buffs, he's only getting 2 very minor nerfs. First of all, his bonus health is being reduced from 450 to 400, but since his base health was increased, effectively this is a 25 HP nerf in his big mode, and he is also getting less elasticity when he uses E. Next up is Scarlet Witch, who is getting a change or a rework in the way her primary fire works. No longer is she doing percentage-based damage, now it is a flat 80 damage per second, which is 5 damage per second more than Cloak. So finally, Wanda is an actual duelist and does more damage than the support, and here is exactly how this is going to affect your targets based on how much health they have. With this change, Scarlet Witch is going to do even less damage to tanks, however, she's going to do more damage to squishies. And if that wasn't enough, her secondary fire, or her orbs that explode, are now going to do an extra 10 damage on impact. So overall, Scarlet Witch is going to be a lot more deadly to squishies, and that doesn't even include her new team-up ability with Strange. But it's not all buffs for Scarlet Witch, because her E ability or her dash is getting nerfed. First, there is a cooldown nerf, and there's also a duration nerf. So it's going to go from 2.5 seconds to 1.5 seconds in your dash, and you're adding an extra 2 seconds to the cooldown. And finally, for Scarlet Witch, they are buffing her ultimate once again, giving her more movement speed. However, she's still going to have a pretty weak ultimate overall. Now for Star-Lord, who is getting a nerf to his E or his spinny shooty thingy. First, an overall damage reduction from 80 damage per second to 75, and there is also a damage fall-off mechanic being added to his E, so it's going to do less damage from a distance. Finally, the last duelist with a balance update is Bucky, who's getting a couple of nerfs, at least outside of the changes from his team-up ability. He's of course losing infinite ammo and getting a dash ability with his team-up with Cap, but for the balance changes, his hook cooldown is being increased from 8 seconds to 12 seconds, which is a very big increase. And Bucky's second nerf is coming to his ultimate ability, which will do 20 less damage on impact. In addition to the overall damage nerf upon impact, there's also a nerf with that red bar that appears after ulting. The size of that red bar is going from 20% of the opponent's max HP to 15. So overall, you're doing less damage on impact from your ult, and now you need to do more damage after the impact to secure the reset. Or in other words, what this means is if you're a 275 HP opponent, if Bucky ults you, he used to be able to get 2 body shots to kill you. Now he needs 3 to get the reset. This also means that if Bucky ults, let's say a Luna Snow or an Invisible Woman, instead of needing 1 headshot to get the kill, now you need a headshot and another shot. A little bit more to kill 275 HP targets after ulting. And that's the last of the duelist changes for Season 2, leaving us with the strategists, which overall did not get changed much, but let's go ahead and start with Cloak and Dagger, who's getting her ultimate fixed, reworked / buffed. They are removing the mechanic where the first dash runs out before the last dash, so now Cloak and Dagger is going to have more of her healing aura out on the battlefield, making your ultimate a little bit closer in power to Luna Snow and Invisible Woman, which was a very much needed buff for Cloak and Dagger. Next up is Adam Warlock, who's seeing a pretty big nerf to his best ability, Soul Bond, going from a 30-second cooldown to 40 seconds, which is approaching ultimate territory. If you weren't already, you are going to have to start treating Soul Bond like its own ultimate ability and not waste it. And the second change for Adam Warlock is when he uses his actual ultimate ability and resurrects the entire team. Instead of everybody having 100 health, now you're going to get 30% of your max HP, or in other words, if you have 650 health like Magneto and Emma Frost, you're going to spawn with about 200 HP, and it's going to scale up as you have more HP. Next is Invisible Woman, who her shield barrier, when she right clicks her teammate, instead of having 300 total HP, it's going to have 250, which is a minor nerf, but it also might be a little bit of a buff, because when her shield runs out of health, the cooldown is based off of its missing health. So if it has less health, the cooldown is going to be faster. So in other words, when it breaks, you're going to have your shield faster off cooldown. So a little buff, a little nerf. Either way, Invisible Woman is still really strong. Next up is Loki, who is seeing a cooldown nerf to his lamp ability, or the green field. Is going from 25-second cooldown to 30 seconds. So like with Adam Warlock's Soul Bond, Loki's lamps are getting a nerf, bringing us to Mantis, who is getting a little bit of a rework. She's going from 275 HP to 250, but she is also seeing an improvement to how her orbs work. You will now be able to stack the orbs, at least the duration, from 8 seconds to 16. So you could just pop 2 heals on a tank and they'll have heals for 16 straight seconds. This is actually a pretty decent buff for Mantis in a few different ways. First of all, you are going to be able to enable your dive DPS so much easier. You could just give them 2 damage boost and they are good to go for the next 16 seconds. This is also going to make Mantis easier to play because now there is less incentive to juggle all of your abilities. You could just send 2 orbs to your tank to heal up for 16 seconds, and now you are free to focus on the fight and get headshots to replenish your orbs. And then also, if you're like me and you've played a bit of Mantis, there are times when you would send a healing orb to one teammate and you meant to send it to somebody else, and then you end up giving 2 to the same person and wasting one of them. But not anymore. It's just going to stack and your efficiency is going to be increased with Mantis. And finally, this will also allow you, if you're heads up enough and you know you're about to die, you could just deplete all of your orbs on a teammate, give them a little last dying wish, and they're gonna have 16 seconds of heals or damage boost while you're dead. And finally, with the most interesting change of all the supports, we have a Rocket Raccoon, who's getting a couple buffs and a couple nerfs. First of all, with the buffs, your projectile speed of your heals is going to be much faster, and with that, if you manage to get your orb to hit a teammate or pass through them, they're going to get 55 HP immediately, which is super strong. However, with this change, your healing orbs are going to do less healing over time. So instead of 70 heals per second, you are now doing 50 heals per second. This, on top of the fact that Rocket is getting a massive cooldown nerf to his dash ability from 6 to 10 seconds, means Rocket is going to be so much less survivable. A lot of Rockets like to shoot the orbs and run around on the walls and have the orb heal them while they're running. But now you're going to get less heals and less dashes. And finally, Rocket's ultimate will no longer boost damage by 40%, and instead it's getting nerfed to 25%. However, you are also now getting 100 bonus health per second, letting you enjoy that amplifier and letting Rocket support ult do support things. And with that, that is all of the update changes for every single hero heading into Season 2.0. And before you click off, I just want to thank you for watching because this is the first video on my channel. I plan on making videos just like this one for future updates in Marvel Rivals, so please let me know down in the comments what parts of this video you enjoyed, like if you liked the graphs or if you wish I covered something else instead with a graph. Let me know down in the comments. I'm open to feedback. And finally, let me know what you think of this Season 2 update down in the comments. Do you think the changes were good or bad? I would love to hear your opinion, and I'll catch you in my next video.